Welcome to another video from the Serious Games Initiative. As you may already know, the Serious Games Initiative is celebrating 20 years of developing and researching games as a means for social good, particularly in our case for policy, education, and outreach. Throughout the decades, our approach has focused on amplifying both science policy discourse and public policy discourse through the engaging medium of games, with titles like The Fiscal Ship and Budget Hero, which focused on the federal budget, and also our latest games, which are about the plastic pollution crisis called The Plastic Pipeline, and AI's Anatomy, as well as another couple of other AI-based games, because AI seems to be a hot topic right now, right, Dave? We also
Absolutely.
su- we also support the broader field of practice through a lot of our efforts. We put together this particular interview series to talk to leaders in the field of serious games to understand both the past, the present, and the future of the field, to sort of understand where we've been and where we're going and how serious games can get us there. I'm joined here today by Dave Miller from NCI. And actually, Dave, do you mind introducing yourself a little bit and how you orient towards the field of serious games?
Sure. I'm Dave Miller. I'm a program director here at the National Cancer Institute, which is one of the 27 institutes and centers that make up the National Institutes of Health. Sort of like main portfolio that I work on is software development generally for creating mathematical models and data analysis tools that enable cancer biology research. So that can be anything from data visualization to the computational core and methods that underlie software to the actual software implementations themselves that researchers at companies and various institutions develop for people to use to identify new cures, new treatments, and new biology that contributes to American health.
Are there any game titles that you've been involved with that we might know?
Yeah, so the most notable ones are probably Eyewire, Foldit, which is a protein folding game, and the Eterna, which is an RNA design game for developing sort of small switches and small microRNAs that can be used for various aspects of biomedical research. But also a number of smaller ones as well that have been used sort of more in academic settings, but still incorporate sort of a gameplay and crowdsourcing approach, like Cancer Crusade, which a team at Moffitt Cancer Center partnered with a game development company to investigate how different approaches to treatment can impact a patient population or individual patients based on their particular, features of their
Mhm.
particular.
Yeah, so and a lot of what ties all those initiatives together is they're really either showcasing research or including people in the research process.
Absolutely. All four of those that I mentioned incorporate a crowdsourcing approach. So that's where, a centralized game is developed and has sort of a computational pipeline underneath it that's based in, computational and biomedical research, but perhaps the interface is more of a game-like interface, a story-based interface in which the public can contribute their skill and expertise and creativity predominantly toward doing some analysis of an image. So, a picture of a cell and a tissue image and you select a number of cells that have some certain quantity, or you make a summary of what you see. Um, Eyewire is an exciting one in that people are doing sort of brain connectomics. So you're tracing neurons throughout a whole stack of images, which certainly until recently it was a very difficult task for AI to perform. And increasingly, the analysis done by the crowd is used to improve those AI methodologies. So it's this sort of systems biology approach as well, where one method feeds into the lab, which new discoveries are made. That feeds back to the computational methods, which also improve and then drive new analyses and edge cases that are needed to be done by the crowdsourcing community.
That's amazing. That's a interesting way to engage people is through games. And you've been in this field for a little while now. I don't want to reveal a number, but can you describe since you like in the past and how what sort of the spark of using games in this particular arena was?
Well, I entered this space in 2013, so this had, a long history even before that, for serious games of various types. I think the exciting piece that has evolved since I started is the sort of public engagement with these tools, right, at various levels. There's obviously the larger celebrated games and software tools that I mentioned, but there's also smaller tools and also additional opportunities that arise. There's a lot of different types of informatics and analysis software that are created in academic settings, and sometimes they're meant for students or they're meant for researchers to use, but also of use in the clinic, day to day at a hospital and such. And the use of those tools, you know, the development is really focused on optimizing the computational core of those tools, but really only very recently has there been more attention focused on the usability of those tools, the user interface, that sort of thing, and frankly the training of those tools. You had to have very specialized training. I think there's an opportunity now for improving that sort of usability and training by having more game elements in bringing you up to speed on how to use the tool, making the interactions more intuitive within the tool, and borrowing various interaction paradigms from the game development community as well as emerging technologies that we see, VR and AR and XR, that sort of thing.
All the cool tools, right, that are emerging in the game space.
It's exciting, and obviously, as you know, it's challenging as well. Any tool has to fit. If it's going to be used in a clinical setting, it has to fit within clinical workflows. The same, in a lab as well. So it just takes development to make sure that, these technologies that are brought over from other fields into biomedical research can be used and applied in a way that makes sense within the new setting.
That sounds like something that has been a lesson learned over the course of years of how to implement these within a clinical setting. It based on just reading between the lines of what you're saying. Could you talk a little bit about how that you've seen that evolution?
It's an area of both on the training side for tools like also VR, which I think had some SBIR funding. Uh, so that's a tool for performing various types of surgeries. The example that I saw was, performing knee surgery. But it's a great way to, increase engagement with sort of earlier stage medical students to use those type of tools. And whether or not that tool specifically is, then transferred over to a clinical setting or not, it's certainly prepared med students who are the ones that are going to be, eventually the medical, the doctors and surgeons that are going to be using the skills that they develop from that sort of game-like VR environment. Um, in terms of uh, what gets brought into a clinical workflow, the game dev community operates pretty fast compared to, I would say, the biomed research. Our standard grant at my institution is 5 years long, and you've made a proposal, you've suggested, what you think you'll learn, and by the end of the 5 years, you've made some biomedical discovery or created some, usually, frankly, early stage prototype of a technology that then, requires further validation, and then, years later away, may be able to go through FDA and other approvals, right? And there's a whole process for that, clinical trials and such, which is very much outside the scope of the early basic biology aspects that I work on. And that's just in cancer, obviously. The whole panoply of disease that the NIH funds, has related but still different processes for these for performing these. So, what might be expected of, oh, we have this VR headset and we expect it'll have a 3 to 5 year life cycle. That may or may not make sense for, a technology, it's based in software analysis, but then has to be, implemented in an existing device. That may take some time. So partnering between, device makers and game development companies that sort of understand these timelines and can work with academic and other folks that sort of maybe not necessarily work on the same timeline is certainly improving, but it is something that I think is going to need additional push.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting how when you bring different industries together or stakeholders together, that we have to learn from each other a little bit on how each of our individual processes works in order to kind of meet in the middle. Is
Yeah, that's
there,
across, most fields.
yes. So when you think of the future of the possibilities of games in your field in particular, but just in general for serious games. What do you think is the next big thing, or what do you think is on the horizon for opportunities?
So obviously integration with AI technology is certainly going to be there right now that you can have a conversation with your computer and gain some meaningful insight and engagement. I think that's both going to impact sort of how we interact with our screens, right? A lot less trying to find things and where to click, and then you just say natural language, here's what I'd like to do. We're already seeing that in sort of the development of mathematical models that are used within the biomedical space. There's folks at Indiana University working on tasks like that for doing certain types of agent-based modeling with a more sort of natural language verbal approach rather than having to sort of, very quickly learn a whole complex tool set and learn a coding language to do that. You can just do it via conversation. The other aspect is that, and this is probably further out and sort of always the dream, I'm sure others that you've talked to have suggested that, is that uh, games and game technologies and game development approaches uh, will, I hope, one day just be another common expertise that people can bring to the table, as opposed to, oh, we're going to reach out so far from the biomedical, software and technology development community to bring in some expertise. It'll be more of of all these folks that we work with, physical scientists, chemists, whomever, it'll be, oh, game developers. They bring their own special set of sort of, engineering, but also sociology type tools for understanding how people interact with each other, with technology. And it will not be sort of a surprise, so to speak.
Yeah.
My one day is that, it just comes in all on its own and doesn't necessarily need its own sort of specific push of a program or of sort of, advocates within agencies that do the sort of work that we do. That's my
Great. That's the dream. That's the dream is not having, in my case, having to explain what a serious game is, for example, would be great. Well, I want to make sure to thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And we'll leave some links down below for some of the projects that you've talked about, as well as, if you don't mind, the portfolio of funding opportunities that you also highlight. So thank you so
absolutely.
much, and really appreciate you being here.
That's Liz.